Well, some people would say this was silly, taking a picture of myself. But I thought I'd sit here and sort of think about the year that I've just gone through. This could be mine, and if it turns out good, maybe I'll send parts of it to you kids. A year ago, 2 years ago and a half, I had my heart surgery. Evidently it healed right up, because I haven't been bothered with it. And the last time I had the test this year, it showed it had healed. There were absolutely no inconsistencies. It's funny, you know, my legs won't let me do a stress test where I have to walk. So they put me on a bed and shot me full of some kind of medicine. And then put my legs on sort of stirrups that moved like a stationary bicycle that I was laying on my back doing. And I was able to go up to the highest and not have any pain at all. Not even really get real breathless. So that turned out okay. I guess the Lord takes care of us when we have things to do. I've been director of the library now for 2 years to the public. It's just been about 2 years since we opened to the public. And of course the library being the Mason City Family History Center, which is connected with the Salt Lake Family History Library, which is the big genealogy thing in the United States. Met a lot of people. Had fun talking to them, guiding them, being able to find out their genealogy. It's always exciting when you can go back and get a lot of names for someone, trace it way back into the past. Leo got sick and dislocated his shoulder in January. I heard him yell at night, and I woke up, and he just turned over in bed and dislocated his arm. Shoulder, left shoulder, the one he dislocated when he was carrying papers. So we went to the hospital at 2 o'clock in the morning. That time I went alone. I told Julie where I was going, or maybe it was about 11, maybe Julie wasn't home yet. And we sat there, and that time I just went in the room with him and sat, but they don't have anything in those rooms for relatives to sit on except a round stool that the doctor uses. And as usual, he could still joke. Leo that was his personality. It took about 2 hours for x-rays and to get it all done, and then we come home. And once it's back in, it wouldn't hurt, but he had to be real careful then for a couple of weeks not to do too much. I think he was careful about a week, and then he was doing dishes again and playing with the dog. That time. So we went in February, and they did a whole bunch of tests. Breathing tests where he had to take 2 or 3 breaths and then breathe in as deep as he could, hold it, and then push it out as far as he could. He wasn't able hardly to make the machine work. We found out that he was breathing in about 75% of normal, but pushing it back out again was down below 50%. So he was keeping a lot of carbon dioxide in his blood. He'd been forgetting pretty badly. You know, we thought he was getting Alzheimer's, but we realize now that it was probably just the lack of oxygen and that buildup of carbon dioxide. So anyway, Dr. Brinkman gave him an inhaler, an inhaler I guess you'd call it, he came home and tried it, but it didn't really work. He just could not get it in far enough for it to do any good. So it was just a matter then of, well, this is what you've got, and you're not bad enough for oxygen yet, because you've got to be so bad before Medicare will pay for it. And that was January. And in April he had to go back for another checkup, and he wasn't much better, but he wasn't much worse. But the blood, when they do a blood sample, it still showed that his blood had about 90% oxygen of the normal level. And so but he didn't feel like going much. We went to the kids' science fair down in Rockwell, and we could only see about half of it. At the time I was upset. I didn't realize how sick he was. And Leo had pushed me so much in my life that I was afraid if I babied him too much, he'd stop trying to do anything. And I thought if he could just keep trying, it would take a little longer to lose everything he had. But in my mind, I was facing a future of him being quite sick and not being able to go anyplace. So I went home with him. In May, he said he just didn't feel like going to graduation. I said, well, go down and wait at Catholic, but he didn't feel like the ride. So I didn't take him, and that was just before Memorial Day, the Sunday before Memorial Day. So we went down to graduation and come home, and everything was okay. He'd gotten along okay. Then the next day was Monday, Memorial Day, and Julie'd gone to work, and I'd gone to the store. I was gone about an hour. I got home about 4, and he was sitting on the couch, blood all over everything. Blood all over his face, his hands, his legs. His head was still bleeding a little bit. His nose was still bleeding quite a bit. I thought he'd had a stroke or something, and he said he'd fallen downstairs. And when I went and looked, there was blood all at the bottom of the stairs and on the walls where he'd crawled back up. So I got him cleaned up, because Leo didn't take many baths, but I got his feet washed and his hands washed and into clean clothes, and got him out to the hospital. And they did x-rays and an MRI, and it didn't show any stroke. It just showed that he did have a broken nose, 3 cracked ribs, and didn't have, maybe a slight concussion, but not really real bad. He had 2 big dents on his head, 2 big bumps, like eggs here on both sides of his head, and a dent right here. So, come home, and I went to the center. Julie would stay with me. I was at the center. And then, you're supposed to wait 5 days, but 5 days would have been Sunday, for about a week. So we went in on the 5th day, which was a Saturday. And Saturday morning he got up and says, I can't breathe. I just can't get my air. And his feet were blue and his hands were blue. Around his mouth was turning blue. So, I think Julie went out with me that day, and we got him back out, and they took one look at him and put him right in a room. And the doctor come in, and they did a blood sample on him, and the doctor told me that he had no oxygen in his blood. And what did we want to do about it? And I was thinking like Dad, bring oxygen home. And I said, well, can't you put him on oxygen? And he said, well, if we tube him up. I said, what do you mean tube him? And he said, well, the only thing we can do is help him breathe, and that's put in a ventilator in. I said, no. And I said, and Leo's in his right mind. He doesn't want to do that. So we talked to Leo, and he said, no. If I'm going to die, let me die, but I don't want no tubes in me. Well, then they took him up for x-rays and found out that his lung had collapsed. So that was why he had no oxygen, and they put him in the hospital, and that was in June. He was in the hospital about 6 days. They didn't send him home with oxygen because once his lung had inflated pretty much, why his blood oxygen come back up again. They should have sent him home with oxygen then, but like they said, once you're on it, you're tied to it. You don't ever get off of it again. So that was June. We went for a couple rides through the summer, and I kept working in the center, but I usually tried to make sure I changed the hours so Julie could be home with him. And sometimes he'd be alone for maybe a half hour, an hour or so, but I'd call a couple times. In August, he dislocated his shoulder again. And we got that fixed. 3rd time in a year. And then Jim come home the 3rd week in August, and we had planned on going back to Chicago together and do some bumming around, but Leo wanted to go with us. Jim has a 10th-story apartment. Leo wanted to see it. So we went, and we went on up to see where Jim had worked. It was about another 100 miles. We went that way. And Leo got diarrhea, so every half hour we had to stop and let him go to the toilet. But at least he didn't go too much in his pants. But he started acting real funny. He was very antagonistic to the waitresses. And I just thought he was being mean. He usually did get mean if Jim and I got to visiting too much. we stopped up for Jim work, satisfied him, and we went to Jim's then, and Jim cooked supper for us, and he cooked Leo one thing, and he and I some Chinese, and we went after groceries, and Leo didn't want to go, but we were gone about 10 minutes too late, and he was very unhappy with me, and didn't want to stay. So the next day, we were going to go out and walk around the forest preserve, and we did go through the building a little bit, but that just tired him completely out. So we got in the car and rode around, but he started making fun of everything we were looking at, so we went back to the apartment. And I asked him if he wanted to go home, and he said yes. And I said, all right, but the next time I come alone. So we turned around and we come straight home, but at least the diarrhea was gone. I was able to get his full board at Jim's, and he really enjoyed Jim's apartment. He could sit that night when he couldn't sleep. He got up and he watched the lights out in the distance, and he watched the sun go down. And so then we come home. We stopped in Waterloo, and he was really obnoxious. And I finally had to tell him when we went to the restaurant. I finally had to tell him. He had his feet clear out in the aisle and was calling every waitress to tell them that we didn't have our order in and that our food wasn't ready. And finally I just told him, you have to shut up. He was acting like and his voice was slurred. Just didn't realize that he was really that sick, that his oxygen was gone, really depleting, no matter what the blood test showed at the hospital. At that time he might have been 95%, but I think the minute he got home he dropped down to about 70%. And he wasn't getting the carbon dioxide out, and so he was having carbon dioxide poisoning. So we got home, and middle of September, he said, I just feel horrible, and again his hands was blue, and he couldn't breathe, and he was coughing. I took him into the hospital, and they thought he was suffering, that Dr. Brinkman wasn't there, so Dr. Levinson come in, and he's a lung specialist, and he said, this man, it's not his lungs, it's his heart. He said, his heart, he's had a heart attack. Leo never had. But I thought, oh no. And as they did more tests, he said, no, is his heart. So he was in the hospital that night on a breathing mask. He could not even get enough air down in his lungs for the oxygen to do any good. So they put a mask on him. He couldn't keep it in his nose. The next morning, the test showed that it wasn't a heart attack, it was his lungs. But he still was joking. You know, the nurses come in and he joked with them, and he said, there's one nurse here that doesn't like me. I said, you mean she doesn't like to joke? He said, well, she don't like me. So he was in the hospital 5 days. Came home with oxygen that time. Felt better with this oxygen on, but of course he was tied in, and he had a tank. We could go, so we went out and we ate one time. And I said, well, do you want to run out to Burger King? And I asked him if we wanted to bring the oxygen in. He said, no, he thought he could do it. But we had to eat real fast. I told him I'd go get the tank, but no. And we went for a couple rides. And then he got diarrhea. What would that have been? He was in the hospital in September, the middle of September. About a week later, 10 days later, he got diarrhea real bad. Or no, he dislocated his arm again. So we were back out for that. And then he, on a Sunday, I went to church, and when I come home, he'd messed his pants. And he didn't even know he'd messed them. And so I took him in and cleaned him up, and his belly was swelling up. And he had no feeling of having to go to the toilet. And by the time he would feel it starting to come out, then of course it was just down his legs. And he'd had a little bit of it in the hospital, so they'd sent me home with some diapers. Or maybe that time I just kept cleaning him up, and going down and washing the clothes, putting towels under him to soak it up. And as soon as morning came, I called Dr. Brinkman then about 5:30, because I know he goes to the hospital real early. And he said, bring him in. By that time, he looked like he was 9 months pregnant. I thought maybe he had a blockage or something that was causing the diarrhea. But the test showed he had gastroenteritis. And so they got him over the diarrhea, sent him home. He dislocated his arm again. 2 days later, had to take him back with a dislocated arm. And that next Sunday, Saturday, I called the doctor and he said, oh no. I called doctor on Monday and I said, he isn't eating right. He isn't eating enough. He doesn't want to move. Is he dying? Should I make him comfortable? If he's not dying, what should I do to make him get his strength back? I said, if he's dying, I'll just make him comfortable. And Dr. Brinkman told me, he said, just keep him comfortable, Alice. And I called Jackie and told her, and she said, you want me to call the kids? And that's when she started calling, and Kathy just couldn't believe it. So she called me that night, and I told her what the doctor said. She said, well, that isn't as bad as what Jackie said. And he wanted to see Larry. And she said, well, she said, I think I can wait till Saturday to come down. And she said, I really don't want Larry to come in and see him this bad. I said, well, that's up to you. And so the next day I called Dr. Brinkman. I said, is there any chance that he's got parasites, that he picked up something during the Second World War or something that's just coming back now? And he said that he'd do any tests we wanted, but he didn't think it would do any good, and there were no parasites. Well, then I went home. Julie stayed with him that day, and Wednesday I went back to the center because Julie was there, and Barbie had come in to go shopping, and he asked her to stay, and Jackie had come in, and he wanted her to stay too. So he had all three of the girls. Julie went out for a little while. They called and told me that he was really hurting breathing. So I called Dr. Brinkman again, and he says, Alice, this time you got help. He says, I'm calling in hospice. And we'd already ordered a bed, and were going to come that night and put the bed up, the only bed that was out of town. And so I closed the center early then and went home, and each day that last week, it was like he was at a stair step to the day. Nothing would change the day, but during the night he would drop, and he'd be worse, much worse the next day. And Tuesday night, I heard him, and he was saying, help me, help me, help me. And I jumped out of bed and ran in, and he was just waking up from a dream. Oh, he said, I had the most horrible dream. He said, I just had the most horrible dream. Leo never remembered dreams. And I asked him if I told him, I sat by him for a while, and he went back to sleep. And the doctor, those last couple months. And so Wednesday, I called Kathy again and told her what doctor said, and that he was much worse. They called in hospice. She started crying. She said, I just can't stand it. It's just like losing Pat all over again. And she said, so anyway, she came, and Betty came. When we called Betty on Monday, Betty just turned right around and came. So she was there when the hospice come in, and they brought in a pad Wednesday night. Wednesday night, Jim's work really involved. Jackie couldn't get a hold of him, so she finally just called his boss, and his boss paged him and bought a ticket into Mason City. Didn't have a ticket back, but she did have a ticket into Mason City. So he got here about 10:30. Jackie went out and picked him up. Kathy'd gone home. She said there were so many of us there that she was needed more at home, and there was nothing she could do. When she come in, Dad told her that he was ready to die, that this was no way to live, and he wanted to die. He said, you think that way, you will die, Dad. You gotta want to get well. And then when she realized it wasn't anymore, it just hurt too much, and I told her to go home. It had been so hard losing Dad. So when they had to put the pad under him because he was starting to get a bed sore, we were able to just lift him up. But to go back to Wednesday night, they gave us morphine. Just liquid morphine. I can't remember the name of it, but it was morphine. It was to help him breathe and relax him so he wouldn't hurt. And Jim talked to him for a little while, and then he started having real hard breathing, hurting real bad again about 12:30. So we gave him some more of the morphine. It had been about 2 hours, 3 hours. And he went into a coma. I woke up the next morning and I thought, he's not breathing. And he was all curled down. The oxygen was off. He was in a fetal position. So sad. He had really lost weight. I'm finally able to cry a little bit about it. I wasn't able to then. So we called hospice. And she come in and she said he was getting a bed sore, so she called for a pad, a geomat pad. And well, there were enough of us there that we just picked him up on the sheet and lifted him straight up. And she remade the bed and we laid him back down. She told us to keep the oxygen on him and be more comfortable. Benjamin's last football game was that night. So Betty took Steve and they went to the ball game. Betty and, I think it was Betty and Julie and Steve, which left, or no, Betty and Steve. It left Julie and I and Barbie and Jackie. And the kids had come in for a little while to say goodbye to Grandpa. And his mouth just kept getting worse and worse. At 10 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 9 o'clock, I said, this is enough. I'm taking the oxygen off. And we all agreed that that's what we should do. About 15 more minutes, he was dead. So we didn't try to call Betty and Jim. We figured they could finish watching the ball game. But it didn't seem right that they should take him without any clothes on, even though we were having him cremated. So we washed him and dressed him. And when hospice came, he was all cleaned up and dressed. And so then we called the funeral home and we told them to give us a couple hours to say goodbye. You know, it's funny. Wednesday, when the hospice nurse came to check him over and sign him up for hospice, he still had a joke. Laura and I used to hate that joking when we were in the store. The funeral came home. It came at midnight, and we signed the papers to have him cremated right away within 24 hours. He didn't leave me enough money to bury him, because I would have buried him if I'd have had the money. And then we had a memorial service at church. My goodness. It was at night, so more people were able to come, and of course we had the urn, oak urn, and we fixed it all up pretty, and we had Brother Lawrence give the plan of salvation, and Charles gave the eulogy, and then we shared our thoughts with him. It was really nice, and there were people. I didn't even realize how many were there until I read the book later. All those people that he joked with, so many of them came. Young kids and old kids. What a wonderful tribute. And all I could think was all the moments we'd wasted. All those moments. All the good times that we ruined by fighting. And I still think that at times. I'm weeping now because it's hard to talk about it. I sometimes wonder if he liked me at all. He could say the meanest things to me. But you see, I loved him when I was 12, They had a crush. That's all it was a crush. But Leo was so much fun. I can remember him. Must have been right out of high school. We moved there in May. No, wipe my nose on my shirt. I guess I should have had some Kleenex. We moved there in May, and I can remember him getting on a bicycle. Margie Barnes and I sat on, remember those old bicycles with big old tires, big old fenders? Barnes and I sat on the back. He stuck Irene up on the handlebars, Ines on the front, and I think Betty Barnes on the seat. And he stuck himself beside us and wobbled up and down the street a few times. All of us screaming and laughing. He was so much fun. And he never lost that with other people. I don't know what he wanted out of me. Perhaps my undivided attention. Whatever he wanted, I couldn't reach. And perhaps there was nothing he could do about it. Once I told Jim his father was like a hand. When he went to Omaha, Jim was 4. And he told Jimmy that if I didn't fight him so much, he wouldn't have to go to Omaha. Now that was the other side of Leo. And Jimmy come up to me crying. Why was I making Daddy go away? He didn't want Daddy to go away. If I wasn't so mean, if I didn't fight so much, Daddy wouldn't have to go away. 4 years old. And I don't know, I think the Lord inspired me. I said, look at your hand. Your father's 2 people. Your hand is 2 things. This part of your hand can do things. It can touch you. It can pat you. It can even slap you. It can work. It can have fun. But look at this part of your hand. It can't grasp anything. It's got all these cells on it. Look at the bottom of your hand, how smooth it is. You don't see the cells on the bottom of your hand. I said, your daddy's like a hand. He's 2 people. And Daddy has to go away to go to work. It has nothing to do with Mama. Mama wants Daddy to come back, and he will come back. Your daddy's a hand. He's 2 people. So when Daddy's like this, you listen to him. But the other Daddy, you don't have to listen. And I told my other kids that a long time ago. I always told them they had to respect their father, although there were through times that he really didn't deserve it. But Leo's moods changed. Even his face changed. And he truly was a different person. One time he told Kathy I didn't have any time for her anymore. I didn't want to have anything to do with her because I was too involved with church. Kathy had called and invited us for supper. And he said, no, I wouldn't want to come to supper. I was too involved with church. So Kathy didn't call me, and I thought, well, why is she mad at me? And then Betty came down to visit. She got on, she says, why in the world are you so involved with church that you don't want to go to Kathy's anymore? I said, who told you that? And then I found out. I called Kathy, and she said Leo told her. He swore to God that he never said it. And I went to Charlie Brown that day. I was substituting, and I had the sleep room, and it was quiet finally, and I was devastated. I thought, what can I do? I cannot stop him from doing these things. And I know that if I'm not sealed to him, that I won't have my children. How can my children be sealed to me if I'm not sealed to their father? And I knew he'd never join the church on earth, although many times he was so close, and then his mood would change, and he'd be back to hating everything again. I also knew Jim was growing up, and I didn't want to hear my last child hear all the fighting that my others had heard. Jim was about 12, Roy was still home. So I sat down and I started writing all the things that I had done that Leo probably wouldn't like, and if there was anything at all that I could have done about it. And then the Spirit came to me, just that small, still voice. He said, because I was thinking about how good he could be. He said, don't worry about the bad Leo. You'll have a good Leo in heaven. So I will be sealed to him as soon as possible. Because if I can have that good Leo, it's going to I have to make myself worthy now in the celestial kingdom. And I've got several problems that I'm going to have to control if I want to try to get us both there. And if I can't have my family in with me. My feeling now is I don't want to be there either. Well, that was what the year was like with Leo. With Julia and I, we had quite a year ourselves. In February, I told Julia, I said, you know, the year before she had spent so much money on flowers. And I told her, I said, you know, I could start seeds for most of those flowers. It'd be a lot cheaper. Well, I had no idea that she was going to buy packet upon packet upon packet of seeds. I had 2 lights downstairs that I had used before for just a few seeds when Dad was living. So that table was quickly filled up. And I said, well, if you want more seeds, we're going to have to get more lights. So she went and she bought 2 more lights. I started another table. Then we got 2 more lights. Finally, I had what you can't see over there is my sewing table, and then I had the table there and the table there, and 2 in the back. So we had 5 tables absolutely packed full of plants, and they grew, and they grew, and they grew. We bought a package of Nicotiniana seeds. We must have got 100 plants. Forget-me-nots, 10 cents, mind you, one of those little 10-cent packets. Forget-me-nots all over the yard. Only thing about forget-me-nots that we found out is they are also stick-tights. So if you want forget-me-nots, oh, they're pretty enough to put up with the stick-tights. You better cut them before they go to seed. Although I haven't had the dogs get into them. Of course, we re-fenced a lot of stuff in. We had dahlias, I don't know, chrysanthemums, moss rose, phlox, 2 to 3 different kinds of phlox, lots of marigolds, and we had the prettiest little zinnias. They're about this big around, and they just grow and grow and grow, and they're all, I think they're called Mardi Gras, and just so pretty. I can't begin to tell you all the seeds that she got. Well, now I have a bunch of perennial seeds to start for next year. And I think I'm going to have a garden next year. And if it's allowed up here, I'm going to have me a dozen chickens. Leo would never let me have chickens, but now I can have chickens. I would like to just have 12 chickens that I know what they're fed. And who knows, even maybe keep some over the winter for eggs. Julie's having a fit. She's an awful lot like her father. An awful lot like her father. So that was our flowers. We had so many flowers, and we took care of so many flowers that we did not go fishing. We went fishing once. We paid $10 for our license and went once. And then by then it was hot summer, and they told us the fish were wormy. Roy's baby was born the 1st of October. And they did an ultrasound. And Roy called me and he said, Mom, he said, we got some disturbing news about the baby. She has a spinal bifida. She'll probably be paralyzed. We don't know for sure yet just how far down. So they did test. As more ultrasound showed, it was in the sacrolumbar region, which would have meant that she was paralyzed from the waist down and would have no control over her bowels and kidneys, but they could be trained. And so he sent me information on the spinal bifida. They said that soon after she was born, within a week, they would do skin graft and cover the spine over, because the spine, there's no spine, there's no vertebrae, so the spinal cord is right there, open, and they would make a covering over that so that it wouldn't get hurt. And then at 6 months, they would start therapy, and they'd start working with her legs and to keep her muscle tone. And that a lot of children are in leg braces and able to walk, and takes a high spinal bifida before they're just always in therapy from the time they're 6 months old. Um, Abortion had been suggested, and they didn't even consider it, although two people that were close to Dawn said she did not have the right to bring a baby into the world, knowing that it would be so crippled. But she said they didn't listen to them. They wanted to do an amniocentesis, and they said no, that whatever the baby was, it was their baby, and they would love it, and we would all love it, and we would take care of it. So all of us knew what we were going to have, and the 1st of October, when Dad was so sick, my baby was born. About 3 weeks before her birth, an ultrasound showed what they thought was slight movement in the legs. And so they thought, well, it might be low enough that she'll only be paralyzed from the knees down, which means she will have control over her bladder and kidneys. And then Roy called me on the 1st, and I think Leo was back in the hospital for something or other. I think maybe he was in the hospital at that time with his bowels. And Roy called me that night and said, I've been trying to get a hold of you, and I told him his dad was in the hospital. He said, Mom, he said, the baby is not paralyzed. Her legs are kicking all over the place. The spinal bifida is a closed spinal bifida, a minor one way inside. Just a slight malnourishment. They didn't know how bad it was at that time. And he called me back a few hours later and said they had put the baby on a ventilator because it was suffering from respiratory distress. Its lungs weren't quite old enough yet. She was a big baby, but she was still 3 weeks premature. Weighed 8 pounds and 14 ounces. And so she was on the ventilator, and they had her on antibiotics to keep any infection from going into the spinal cord. Then on the 3rd day, they were able to take her off of the ventilator, and she was breathing on her own by then. And they did an MRI and found there was, I don't really understand, there was bone cells or part of the vertebrae or some kind of cells growing or in towards the spinal cord, and they wanted to remove those because as she grew, that would make her deformed and possibly retarded. So they did that, and when she was about 2 weeks old, they got her home 10 days or 2 weeks. Dawn bought an electric breast pump and kept her breast pumped out, and she fed on Dawn's milk all the time. And so Dawn was nursing her when she got home. She had 6-week pay. Roy could have up to 6 months, so he was still home for a little while after the baby was born. And I told him, I said, don't even try to come, because I know that whenever something happens, he's just right here. And he said, so he called back, and he said, well, since we can't come, we're going to send you a round-trip ticket to come and see us. And so they did, and I went down the week before Thanksgiving. Oh, she's such a beautiful baby. And I got to see her first smile. I got to meet the babysitter, wonderful woman, little teeny woman, even shorter than, tinier than Barbara, and she's a Spanish lady. She's from Peru. She came to this country about 22 years ago with her son. I guess her son came first, and then she came, and then they sent for one daughter. And so through the 22 years, her family has they've been able to bring the rest of the family here. And so she's babysitting a grandson in Tucker. Baby. And those kids are just so well adjusted, you know they've got a good babysitter. Chloe is in the 1st grade, and really a sweet little girl. She really enjoyed having me there. And just a normal little girl. She does get naughty sometimes, but Dawn will say, all right, Chloe, 1, and by 3, she's minding. They have a couple walls with just pictures of Katie, and they want Katie to come this summer and stay long enough to be living there, not just be a visitor. So I hope Nancy goes along with that. Jackie was going to take me to the airport in Des Moines and got sick, so I had to take the car down. The day I took the car down, I left real early because we were supposed to get freezing rain in Des Moines. And all I could think of was, what if I come back and my car's all froze shut in an outdoor parking lot? How do I get it unthawed? I thought, well, Lord willing. So we got down there. It was 80-some degrees when I got into Houston. Oh, so warm. And they were just wonderful to me. I enjoyed myself so much. Saturday before I came home on Tuesday. The Saturday before, we went down to Galveston, and Chloe and I waited along the edge. Of course, we didn't get too wet. We just got wet enough that I had to sort of traipse into Walmart with wet jeans and find myself another pair of pants because we were still going to go bumming. Took a ferry out into the middle of the bay and back. I really enjoyed myself. They're a very nice couple. I just think Dawn is wonderful. And come home, and then I had to cook for Thanksgiving. And then the 6th was our Christmas party at church. They wanted me to read a poem or write a poem, but I haven't written anything for so long. I'm going to go back to the writing group because I do want to get back to writing, and that way I'll have to. So I thought, well, this time I don't have to do nothing because they have. Well, Audrey calls me and says, "Can you do a turkey? Because so-and-so can't do it." So I went down the 6th, Saturday morning at 10. And I told her I needed chicken bouillon. She bought beef bouillon. Finally, I got the turkey in the oven. She was going to do the ham in a roaster. The only thing is, she didn't put it on. And I called her and said, "Audrey, you didn't turn that ham on." So I did the ham. And then I did the mashed potatoes, and I did the gravy, and the macaroni and cheese is what I made, a great big pot of it. And cherries. And I was so tired I couldn't eat. I'm getting old. The things that I used to do that made me hurt, but nevertheless, I'd get over it in a couple hours. I wasn't able to go to church next day. I could not move in the morning. I ached so bad at night that I finally went in and soaked in the tub. I just can't do it anymore. So then that day, we've got this program coming up called Ancestors on public television. So Barbie calls me and says that they want to do a open house during that time. And they wanted to know if it was okay with me. And I said, fine, yeah, I'll do it, I don't care. I said, I don't set it up, I don't plan it, I don't decorate it, I don't take it down, but I will tell people how to use PAF. I said, you can do the library because you know the library too. Then I get this letter from the church saying that we're not supposed to use the program or the Family History Center to sponsor a program doing with that ancestors. So I don't know what they're going to do, I don't care. I can turn over the priesthood and it's up to them. Well, that was the 6th. The Saturday before Christmas, then I had not bought any Christmas presents yet. So I had to go out and shop. And then the Saturday before Christmas, everybody was in. Jim didn't make it home for Christmas this year. The weather was too bad, and he was working too hard, and he was just too tired, and he couldn't get more than 2 days off. But we were all here, got to meet Larry again. I don't think Kathy really appreciated our funeral services. I don't know. But anyway, Larry was here and gets along real good with Daniel and Richard. He's just right in that age. I finally asked Jackie and Barbie to come down to help me clean the basement and the kitchen. I just couldn't get it done. I was just so tired. I told myself when I dropped dead, remember I told you how tired I was. So we had that Saturday, and then we had Christmas Eve. Jackie and Barbie come back for that, and but my house was just barely picked up for that. We were going to have New Year's Eve And Monday night, Julie got the flu, and I felt like I was getting the flu. So we didn't have New Year's Eve. But Benjamin did get down on New Year's Day to watch Sound of Music. I got that. I got this shirt from Julie, and I got the Sound of Music from Julie. I got a steamer from Roy and Dawn. A lot of pretty things. I should have them here, but I'll have to bring them in later and just focus on them where I can. So it's been quite a year. One of my New Year's resolutions is to try to forget all the sad times that Leo and I had. Just try to remember that other people did like his joking. Sometimes he embarrassed me. Maybe I would have liked it too if I had never had some of the meanness. When he was in a bad mood. And I know that inside he was probably hurting just as bad as I was. He used to come in and lay down beside me the last year or two. When his memory started going, he forgot how to be real mean. Not completely. He was just Leo. He was my husband for 49.5 years. I never loved or was tempted or attracted to any other man but Leo. He was all I ever wanted. And all I ever will want. And I hope someday I do have that good Leo in heaven. It's been 1996. I am 67 years old. Monday the library opens back up again, and I'll have that. And I'm rested now. Last night I went to bed at 9 o'clock and didn't get up this morning till 9 o'clock this morning. It's going to do me good to have to get out of this house again. And I don't want to sleep my life away. I figure I got 20 more years. A lot of things I'm going to do. Next year I'm going to go back to the writing group, and I'm going to start writing poetry again. I don't care if it's the worst poetry in the world. If it don't rhyme, has no sense, no meaning. I'm just going to start. I want to get Mother's personal history typed in to my computer. I'd like to have a copy machine, a scanning machine, that I can scan it all in, but they're $400, so I won't. Thought the refrigerator was going. I did get a new printer because my printer's 5 years old, and I figured if I didn't get it out of the insurance money would be gone and I wouldn't be able to get one when it goes. Thought the other night the refrigerator was going. Took me 8 hours to completely get all the ice out of the inside of it, but I think it'll be okay now for a while. Did have to get a new hot water heater. Leo left me with a wonderful family, a lot of bills, and no money. So it's going to be real interesting the next 3 years. Lord, poor Julie. If I die in those 3 years, she's really stuck too. But I ain't going to die. I'm going to get some photography done. I'm going to do a lot of things. I'm going to get some plugs in this basement if I got to do it myself. I'm going to times and I watch the English shows. What is it? Keeping Up Appearances. And Are You Being Served? That was his favorite. Of course, he liked All Creatures Great and Small. We watched that together. Yeah, I'm going to miss him. And this year, I'm going to start writing down all the good times. And I'm not going to mention the bad times that ruin the good times. I'm going to write down and remember the good times. Maybe if I try real hard before I die, I could say, oh, we got along so good. We had so much fun. We never had a fight. Maybe I can. Bye now.